This is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered.
Hey, you guys, I wanted to come on here and talk about Van Jones for a moment and also talk about Black people's very predictable emotional response to Joe Biden winning the presidential election and viewing this victory from a perspective of symbolism. And just a heads up, there will be some profanity in this video because at this point I'm seeing three-ring circuses all over the place, and if this video doesn't get monetized because of that, I could care less. Everyone by this point is aware that Joe Biden has won this election, and Black people, with their predictable behavior, took to social media talking about how this is a victory and Kamala is the first Black woman to secure the role of vice president. Not once have I heard this woman ever claim her 20% Blackness, except for when it was convenient for her to pander to Black people. But I think because of our gullible nature of thinking that someone is going to seemingly help the conditions of our community, we give blind support to people who have not shown us what they can really do. And the Black community, in a way, is like a large group of babies that take on the form of adults. Infants typically rely on someone to take care of them and the problems they face. And largely, this is something that Black people do all too often, as opposed to fixing their own problems. They're completely dependent upon someone, and not just anyone, but people from outside of their community to align with them on social and political issues. And they expect for a white savior to come in and save them. So they parade around this figure and then claim some victory that isn't specific to their community. But because of our propensity to view symbolism as some tangible substance, we think that it's going to finally eliminate the systemic issues of our community. And we also have this habit of giving excuses to these same people because if you question Black people about if the conditions of our community will improve, the response will be along the lines of, oh, well, they got to clean up the mess Trump made first. Or, it takes time for them to devise a plan. Just a bunch of bullshit to make sure you remain stagnant, and the justifications that are given to these situations make me wonder if Black people like being last and if they find reprieve in being complacent in their current social status. And I'll touch on this more in the conclusion of this video, but I just want to get into this and talk about Van Jones and his questionable stance in this climate. Now, Van Jones, as we all know, was Obama's former White House advisor, and I don't know if you guys remember, but not too long ago, he made a comment talking about how Trump has done good stuff for the Black community. He then further doubled down on this by stating that he worked with Trump on criminal justice stuff, and apparently, in the eyes of Van Jones, Black people who were formerly incarcerated were treated kindly by Donald Trump, so that should warrant Trump some type of respect. This tap dancing that Van Jones does and flip flopping back and forth between liberals and conservatives is nothing new, but it makes his character very questionable as he sits up here and talks about the quality of one's character. And I really don't think he should be the messenger on that one. And these theatrics and spectacles that he puts on, to me, just make me shake my head because I'm having a tough time processing how it is that someone can claim to always have the community at heart while tap dancing for his oppressors, and then be married to the same group of women that gives birth to the men who contribute to his problems. Then you'll have wonderful and magnificent Black people come on here and ask the most delightful question: what does his relationship have to do with advocating for Black people? I won't go too deep into that one, but I will say this. The only people who don't seem to fully understand the concept of race as Black people. We are the only ones who are convinced that you can love the hate out of someone or lay the foundation for some type of consonance each and every time you get dirt kicked in your face. And I want you guys to watch this very brief clip because I could only handle a few seconds of it. But Van Jones is going to go on this emotionally pathetic speech about how now life will be so much easier because 45 is no longer in office.
Well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters.
Just a shit show. And let's be real, this country was founded on bloodshed and racism. And the way we are reacting to this election gives off the impression that we think 400 years of oppression are gone and that some planetary alignment that will fix everything is in our favor. We frolic freely in our naivete and express joyous sentiments as if the United States has ushered in a new era of prosperity, love, and peace. And now that the devil is gone, Jesus must be coming back. And the thing about it is, I'm not even trying to be funny. I want you guys to see this for yourself. I mean, look at this picture. This is the buffoonery I'm talking about. The only thing missing is the damn chicken and watermelon meet and greet at the nearest Atlanta Waffle House.
Is this a fucking joke? Somebody tell me this is a fucking joke. Tell me, somebody. Is it a joke?
This must be a joke, and it's not a funny one at all. I don't find any humor in this. We are on display acting like a minstrel show for free, and when I tell you that I'm done like yesterday and want to leave this nightmare, I mean it. So earlier in the initial part of the video, he mentioned that this is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. My only question to that is who's vindicated and who's suffering and who's still suffering at the grip of this country. And with word semantics and the ambiguity that surrounds these statements, it almost in a sense gives off this sort of all lives matter rhetoric, but in a coded way. And listen, y'all, I'm sorry, but the music had me dead after he said that. It's nonsense and foolishness. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why the black community is looked at with such hilarity and not in a good way. Even in moments where we need to be serious about a topic or subject, we oftentimes put on these unnecessary performances to relay a point. And I really don't even know why he was crying because surely his superlative wife should have provided him comfort about navigating life in this country. And really, honestly, I call this guy's bluff. He's one of the black people that I think Malcolm X would want us to be careful of because if you guys paid attention to my previous videos, Malcolm X warned us about Negroes that align themselves with white liberals, and Van Jones is one of those people. Now, just because I'm saying all this doesn't mean I like Trump, because 100% of you have this misconception that dismissing the slave narrative of supporting liberals unconditionally is somehow synonymous with swearing your allegiance to racist Republicans, but I can assure you they are just as radioactive. And I also want to say this you cannot parade around talking about how you're so revolutionary while actively engaging in another group's political affairs, as opposed to having a focused and concerted effort toward your own. I'm sure some of you will say you can do both, okay, but ask yourself if one has not produced physical results in the time you've been given permission to participate in it, then how is it beneficial to continue in a counterproductive action? Now, black people rejoicing in a victory that does nothing to help their community is not only confusing but disturbing. I even saw some people with these talking points where they'll say, we should vote to get them in and then hold them accountable for their promises. Okay, so we haven't been doing that. I'm wondering why we wouldn't do that anyway with these past politicians that make the same promises and leave your community the moment they get into presidency and then leave you for the dust. And it just goes to show how black people don't know how to maneuver politically at all. And the sad thing is, they'll get you all riled up every 4 years, tell you to go vote, but really they can't even tell you why you should vote for a candidate. Save for the ones who actually research the policies and legislations that they do find to be favorable, but for the ones who just blindly do this, they could very well be voting for a person that will make unemployment skyrocket even higher than what it's already at. Since we don't possess foresight and we don't think about how rules and regulations will affect us subsequently to a politician's inception into the Oval Office, the only thing we care about is a biracial woman's ascension to a prestigious position because of our ignorance of wallowing in the one drop rule. We see her as a black person despite the fact that she doesn't claim it except for when it's convenient, and I see this for something deeper. I believe that this at some point will backfire, and our cognitive dissonance collectively won't allow us to see any wrongdoings that could potentially take place. But that's just black people's nature. It's been this way for several generations, and this pathology is one that is wholeheartedly detrimental to our very stagnant progression, if any was made at all, except access to education and permission to be in the presence of the larger society without consequences. It also opened my eyes up to a very real reality. Black people collectively have stated numerous times that their primary objective is to obtain equality and they want to be treated fairly and they want other people to know their lives matter. I don't know why we're so desperate and adamant to prove that, but okay. But my point is black people don't want liberation. They are very content and happy with their current state of being under another group of people. It's the incentive behind why for so long we continue to face systemic oppression and why we talk just to hear ourselves talk when we cry about these things, yet we continue these same behavioral patterns. And it's like, what do you expect? Of course, nothing is going to change for you if you don't change the way you think and approach situations. I've had to cut a lot of people off because when I have these conversations, they react to it with their emotions, despite the fact that a majority of them said that they were free thinkers. And it's like, you know what? I'm convinced we just say things sometimes because we like to hear ourselves talk and we indulge our egos with this whole nonconformist mess when truth be told, none of you are, because when you believe in someone else's system to help your community instead of helping your own community, it's an excuse to keep you from creating resources and sustainability. And so when other cultures and communities talk about how black people are lazy, they say that because they see how you have to go into other people's communities for means and capital. And granted, I understand that our economic power is heavily suppressed, but very little initiative is made to combat this. And I know we have some black owned businesses, and that's fine, but unfortunately, it's not enough to be able to compete with other markets. And I also don't understand how we can find any sort of respite in this because Joe Biden made that comment about how you aren't black if you don't vote for him. But clearly, that didn't matter to black people because they were so focused on getting Trump out of office because of some unproven impending fear that something was going to happen if we didn't vote for Biden. So clearly, the larger society is aware that you can say anything you want to black people, and it really doesn't matter, especially if you're a Democrat, because they know your belief in them is guaranteed. They know you're not going to hold them accountable for anything because you'll forget it about it 2 weeks later and go right back to supporting them. And it also adds to the fact of why cancel culture doesn't work because the only thing black people can cancel apparently is each other. And when it comes right down to it, black people are like a hook, line, and sinker because it is very easy to deceive us. All you have to do is not be racist to our face, or at least display your racism in a subtle manner, and we're bought and sold. You really can't deny this fact because if you think Biden doesn't harbor a racist fiber anywhere in his body, then you are lost somewhere on Jupiter. And the only reason Kamala is there is because she's subservient to the agenda that he was in support of, and they know that it will keep black people tuned into this eternal game of watching pilgrims fight over this incessant game of power that we'll never have. I feel like now is the perfect time to address this tired narrative. Again, this is why I say black people don't have a vested interest in dismantling the system at all because they keep finding excuses to keep it in place. I saw a few posts on Twitter talking about how apparently Joe Biden wasn't directly responsible for the crime bill that disproportionately affected black people. The context that surrounds this is that when this bill was initially introduced, the black activists actually saw this plan for what it was and harbored dissension towards it. And of course, there was an issue present in the black community at that time with the drug epidemic. But the irony behind it is that that same organization responsible for the implementation of drugs into the community were the same ones black people put their faith into. The government financed Contras in Nicaragua in an elaborate scheme to continue their corrupted plan of capitalism throughout the world and eradicated any socialist or communist uprisings. But that's besides the point. Whether he was responsible for it or not, or for its creation, he was still a willing participant. And I know it won't make a difference because any facts mentioned of black people is literally the equivalent of talking to a brick wall. All I'm saying is the same government that we vote and place trust in orchestrated that whole plan, and those harmful substances put onto our community were deliberate in its purpose. But I'm done watching the circus. I guess somebody will have a big bowl of chitlins and a cookout somewhere later on. I try and really practice patience with black people because I understand the conditioning that we are still prone to, even after several centuries have passed. And it isn't something that just goes away after showing them the truth about questionable and skeptical situations. Their minds will not allow them to escape that four-dimensional box they're perpetually stuck inside of. And some know the truth, but evade remedying the situation because it involves strategically coming up with solutions to take action. Then when you tell them this, they're like, oh, well, what are you doing about it? And I'm just like, I'm trying to make you see that something is very wrong here. But that's all I'm going to have to say about this. This year has brought out the worst in a lot of people, more specifically black people's pathology. And the ignorance that permeates the foundation of our progression is what keeps us from seeing the world for what it really is. Now, you all can get mad, you can dislike the video. I really could care less because I'm not going to sit here and act as though this is the cure to all of our problems. The only thing missing at this point is the tambourine and the Holy Ghost.